Welcome back to the Draft Lab. I'm Joel Worth, and this is the IDP Plus Best Ball Show. Tonight, we are finishing up our IDP positional series by looking at the redheaded stepchildren of the defensive world, the defensive backs. With me to help me out is my buddy, Axton Harding. Ax, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Can't complain at all. Life's been pretty good, so just ready
Awesome.
to dive into some DB rankings.
Yeah, we're getting close to the season, so we got to get this wrapped up. People got drafts coming up. We got to make this happen. So what we're doing was we're going over the Fantasy Pros positional tiers for each position group. We've done the defensive line. We've done linebackers. You can go back and check out those videos. Tonight, we're going to do the defensive backs, like I mentioned earlier. So let's take a look at the Fantasy Pros scoring settings. So it's 1.5 for a solo tackle, 3/4 point for the assisted tackle, 2 for a tackle for loss, 4 points for a sack, 5 points for an interception, 4 points for a fumble, 4 points for a fumble recovery, touchdown, safeties, all pretty normal. Ax, this is a best ball show. Are these pretty typical scoring settings? And obviously DBs are always going to be better in best ball, but talk about the scoring settings a little bit and how they're going to apply to the defensive backs.
In this one in particular, it seems to be a little bit more tackle based. The sacks being, I think it was like 3 points or so, 4 points. That's a little depressed compared to your typical IDP leagues. Not to say that it can't help. Obviously, when you're talking about defensive backs, you don't typically think about someone who gets a ton of sacks. But there's plenty of guys out there. The way the NFL is kind of moving nowadays, there's a lot more defensive backs that play in the box and around the line of scrimmage and will get you a sack here and there. Some guys blitz pretty regularly and have kind of a track record of collecting so many sacks or whatever throughout the season. So we want to kind of pay attention to those for guys like that we know are going to be playing in the box and have that sack upside, can get us some extra points. So tackles for loss being 2 points is pretty significant. That's a little bit higher than average. I think that's probably making up for a little bit of the lower sack scoring. So we kind of like to note those when we're talking about defensive backs. They're not huge, but they add an extra little cherry on top for IDP. So then again, I think pass deflections was like 1.5. I usually play most of my leagues. Pass deflections are about 4, interceptions are 5 or so, because that just kind of brings the defensive backs overall up kind of more to par with the other IDP positions in just sheer scoring terms. So that's just kind of what I notice off the rip. So your interceptions aren't going to quite get as much as what you typically would. I think maybe they were a little higher, maybe like 5 or 6.
INTs
if
are
I
5,
remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's some value there, especially for those guys that are kind of always known to be ball hawks. So just a few things that I noted. Of course, you want to, with the tackle based scoring, you want your heavy tacklers, so they're always going to be pretty reliable and give you a good floor.
Absolutely. All right, so before we get into the rankings, we want to talk about our partnership with Expedia. We are thrilled to announce our new partnership with them. They are your one-stop shop for the best prices in the travel world. Now, I know school's starting up again pretty soon, but if you want to get one more trip in with the kids before they go back to school, Expedia is the perfect place to make that special trip happen. You can get 10% or more off at over 100,000 hotels worldwide and 30% off when booking a flight with your accommodations. So check out the link in the show description and get your next adventure planned today. All right, Ax, let's get to tier 1 of the Fantasy Pros defensive back rankings. Tier 1 is pretty short. Derwin James, Antoine Winfield Jr., Jaquan Brisker, Kyle Hamilton. Any player you think deserves to be in that top tier that isn't? And if so, who would you drop out?
Oh, let's see. Just to start, my candidate to drop out would probably be Jaquan Brisker, just because we haven't seen him produce a DB4 or even really close to that kind of finish. He's been in the league for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. I've actually got him pulled up here. Let's see. Oh,
He was class
2
of
years.
22,
Excuse
right?
me. He's a little younger than I expected, but still, he's a guy that will get you a good tackle floor, but he's not somebody that's really given us or shown us much upside. Last year, I think his best game he had 17 tackles. That was probably the extent of his upside. We didn't see very much more than that. Just a really solid floor guy. So I think guys like that don't really necessarily belong in that top tier. You want a guy that's kind of got more upside, more explosion in his play. So Antoine Winfield, Derwin James, and Kyle Hamilton definitely fit that bill. Guys who are getting, just tons of tackles, pass deflections, sacks. They're getting it on, and they're scoring up there and trending at least into that top tier. Guys that I would maybe bump up, I don't know. I think this tier deserves to be small. I think, and when you're talking about defensive backs, if you can stay in that top 5, and you're ranked in the top 5, you're consistently up there in the top even 10 players, you're pretty good. And I think you should at least be, up there in the top tier or very close to it. And I think those 3, Kyle Hamilton's probably. Last year, we're probably stretching it a little bit, putting him up here already. But, from everything we've seen, the trend is just, going straight to the moon with him. And I don't think we've seen the best from him yet. But guys to move up is kind of what I was referring to here. And I think Jesse Bates is a good candidate to kind of move up, possibly. I don't think I would place him here yet, but definitely the top 15 belongs there. And just having looked at his track record, and 4 of his 6 seasons he's had 100 tackles or more, so definitely a guy that's got more than enough solid floor for you. A guy who's had 3 interceptions in every season but 1, so you can almost there's a floor in and of itself in a statistic that isn't typically one you can bank on. And then you're also looking at somebody who's getting 11 pass deflections with those 3 interceptions, so almost 1 a game at least, sometimes probably 2 or 3 in a game or something like that. So I think Jesse Bates, just out of sheer consistency and the track record, I think he could be somebody that, if he keeps up this kind of floor, I don't see why he couldn't just kind of hang up there with those guys. But he would probably be my top one to kind of move up into this top tier if I had a candidate at all.
Yeah, I'm agree with you on all those points. Like Brisker, I have no idea how he's in this top tier. Like I think he's a good player, but we've just never seen that kind of elite production from him. And like he's only his 3rd year, so I don't know how he's in there. That takes a lot of projection. I do love Kyle Hamilton. I like at the end. Obviously, there's going to be a new defensive coordinator coming in this year, but I don't know how you look at what he did at the end of the year and in the playoffs and, change what you were doing with him. He was just taking over games. So I like that. And Jesse Bates, another guy I think you could put in this category. We just found out that Matthew Judon's going to be going to Atlanta. So we'll see how that affects them. They may have someone who can actually rush the passer now. That's interesting for them. We'll see how that affects Bates. They just been last in sack rate for basically the last 3 years or something like that. They're just so. Judon was injured last year, and we'll see what happens. But I don't think that's going to hurt Jesse Bates at all. I think there's just so many opportunities in that defense for him to make plays. So yeah, that's a guy I like quite a bit as well. And I'm not sure I would put him in tier 1, but I think you can make a case. If he has another year like last year, I think you probably have to.
Yeah, I agree. Like I say, with defensive backs being kind of the way that they are, I think guys that can consistently find themselves up there in the top just kind of deserve to be ranked up there and step there. Because that's just a feat in and of itself to be able to consistently finish up there among the top.
Yep. Okay, so let's move on to tier 2. Again, another short tier. Budda Baker, someone who has shown some consistency, a veteran player. Kyle Duggar, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Brian Branch, a 2nd-year player. So, X, looking at this tier, any player you would move up into this tier, and who would anyone you think should have to drop out?
Oh, let's see. Someone to move up. I think Brian Branch is a candidate that could move up this year. I don't think I would quite move him up yet. I think that's where he kind of belongs, right around that 10, 11 mark. We just saw a ton of upside in his first year alone. So, and we all know that defensive backs really just thrive in Detroit. So, anybody that can grab onto those valuable roles, we saw Melifonwu last year really come out as a cornerback for this team and really just had a tear to end the season. So, I think that he would be a good candidate to possibly move. I'll keep him where he's at for now. Julian Love would be another one. I really like him the last couple of seasons. A couple of years ago, he was an waiver wire revelation, and he's just kind of hung up there. I think he's been, him and Derwin James are the only two that's been ranked in the top 10 the last 2 years, year to year, back to back. So it just goes to show the volatility of the position and just how often they change. To put it into perspective, most teams run 4, even 5 defensive backs. So that's probably more starters than any other position in fantasy, and there are a good portion of them are relevant. So when you're talking about numbers like this, the top 10 isn't as vital as maybe it would be with like tight ends or wide receivers or something like that. If you can even grab somebody in the top 30, you're still looking at the top 25% of all the starters in the league. So, I mean, it just really, you can kind of broaden your net in like the kind of guys that you want to look to grab, because the difference in scoring from DB like 10 to 15 is probably not far off from like DB 30, 35. It's probably like 20 or 30 points scoring depending on your scoring settings. So that's just kind of reference for defensive backs in general, just to kind of think about it in a more broad way. But yeah, Julian Love being able to be in the top 10 year after year, I think he deserves to be in that second tier at the very least. If he keeps it up, he could be another one like we're talking about with Jesse Bates that can maybe even move up into tier 1 if he can kind of put a string of seasons together. I don't see why he can't. So that would be probably a couple of guys I would move up. Grant Delpit's been pretty consistent, but he kind of belongs there. Someone to move out, I think Minkah Fitzpatrick and Josh Metellus would be my guys. Josh Metellus did great last year, but Josh Metellus has really only done it for a year, and cornerbacks are really too lucrative in Minnesota, or haven't been historically. We're kind of like the safeties a little bit better. Cam Bynum, I'm surprised we didn't see him up more. I'm surprised we didn't see these two flop. They're about 3 spots away. So I would probably put Metellus down just because I want to see it for another year before I really know that he's not just a Jalen Petrie kind of player that's just going to flame out in a year. So Minkah has just been somebody that has trouble staying on the field. And his overall production season to season has just fluctuated. We've seen him get like 60 tackles in a season, over 100 tackles in a season, several interceptions, but then the next season he might get 70 tackles and score you 50 less points. It's just been complete inconsistency, and I don't think that it's the kind of production that I want to see in the top 10. So I'll probably bump him out.
Yeah, when you're talking about Julian Love, guy I've got a soft spot for because he won me a playoff game that I had no business winning, that Monday night game against Philly when he had 2 picks, especially that late one. Just that pick by itself kind of won me a playoff game, like I said, that I had no business winning. So I've definitely got a sweet spot for him. And like I said, we talked about Kyle Hamilton losing Mike McDonald. He's going to Seattle, so we'll see what he does with Julian Love. Should definitely be interesting. A guy I think definitely has a shot to kind of move up into that second tier. The guy I'm just kind of stunned is down as far as he is, and I think belongs in tier 2 is Javon Holland. Missed a few games last year, but absolutely had an absolute breakout year. If you go by like PFF grade, played really well. Xavier Howard's gone. Jalen Ramsey's getting older. They're moving on from Vic Fangio, who, I has never, that system just doesn't tend to, produce elite defensive players unless you are, a Jalen Ramsey type. So I think it's going to be much more interesting. I love Javon Holland. I think if he's healthy, if he can stay healthy, then he absolutely belongs in that second tier.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Javon Holland was really one that flashed, and he was kind of frustrating, but in a hopeful way last season, where like you just wanted to keep playing him because he kept giving you what you wanted to see, but it was just you couldn't really get him to stay on the field. So I think this season there shouldn't be much change in his role, if anything at all. Actually, matter of fact, just because of the detriment of this defense as a whole, I don't see why they wouldn't ask him to do more. Maybe he plays up along the line of scrimmage more to help, make up for kind of shortcomings they have at edge rusher with Jalen Phillips coming back from injury, and now Ginkle is gone, so they don't, and Chubb's, both their star edge rushers were hurt last year coming off injury, so they're going to need some help. It's going to take some time for them to come back. Maybe they ask the defensive backs to play up more around the line of scrimmage. That only increases Javon Holland's ceiling here. So he's definitely a candidate. You jump down a couple of tiers from what I was even looking at. So I like that pick to kind of hop up a couple of tiers.
Yep, definitely. All right, so let's move on to tier 3. And we've talked about a few of these guys, but we'll just go down the list. Tier 3 is Jesse Bates, who we've talked about, Grant Delpit, who you mentioned, Cam Curl, Xavier McKinney, new Packer, love that. Julian Love, Josh Metellus, and Nate Hobbs. So from this tier, any player you think belongs in tier 3, and any player you would, a few that you've already mentioned that maybe you'd want to drop out, particularly maybe Josh Metellus?
Yeah, probably. I'd probably swap Josh Metellus and Cameron Bynum, but I still wouldn't put Cam Bynum up in that next year. I think we'll kind of firmly belong tier 3, maybe even lower, maybe like a high tier 4. If Javon Holland's in tier 4, I think these guys probably belong a little below him. So you may have to actually. You may have to read them off again to me. Because I'm looking at their actual. I know we have our list, and now I'm actually looking at their ECR rankings, and there's a little bit of difference. So read them off to me one more time.
So it's Jesse Bates, Grant Delpit, Cam Curl, Xavier McKinney, Julian Love, Josh Metellus, and Nate Hobbs.
I mean, shoot, in tier 3, I think there's tons of candidates to move up. I like Nate Hobbs. He's a solid floor guy. I want to see a little bit more big boom games out of him, but I really like the reliability you get from him as a cornerback. You can always get him as a value. So Jesse Bates, another guy to bump up. Cam Curl, I really liked him, but I probably wouldn't keep him around these guys just because we haven't seen the production quite to the level that some of the guys he's hanging around are. There's new opportunity in LA, so who knows? Maybe he kind of, flourishes there and becomes what we all kind of assumed he was going to be. McKinney, I really like Xavier McKinney. I wasn't as big a fan of him in New York, but for some reason now I don't know. I'm kind of slowly creeping into the fandom of Xavier McKinney because I'm just hearing a lot of good things about the Packers and how much they like him, and I've even heard something about like Xavier, even though he's not the green dot. No, he's not the green dot, but even though he's not the green dot, he does make decisions like each play on the defense in terms of just like telling which defensive back is blitzing on any given play. That was something that kind of accidentally got leaked, but people like blew it up, and I saw something where the head coach was like, "Oh, I'm glad this guy's giving away our secrets." But yeah, apparently Xavier McKinney is he kind of just pulls the trigger. He's the one who pulls the trigger and tells whoever is going to blitz on any given play who to rush the quarterback. So just that trust I like, and the fact that we've seen McKinney go on, let's see, in 2022 he didn't play a full season. Injuries kept him there, but If you look at 2021 and this year, 93 tackles, 116 tackles. The guy playing around the line of scrimmage, he's recently getting he doesn't rush often, but it's possible he gets a sack here and there. He's always a guy that's getting his hands on the ball in coverage, though. Somebody who's going to get you deflections. In those 2 years, he's had a minimum of 3 interceptions, so there's another good little floor for him. I just kind of like his opportunity to develop in Green Bay, especially if they're going to put this kind of trust into him. So he's another guy that I think kind of has more upside than maybe what we're ranking him as here.
Yeah, and it sounds like they want to use him kind of more in the box than the Giants did. It sounds like, when they signed there, thought he would be kind of their heavy, like full-time post safety, free safety, but it sounds like they want to be really multiple and not predictable. So, they'll kind of move back and forth with McKinney in the box or Javon Bullard in the box. So I think they want to mix things up, and I think McKinney's actually going to see more snaps in the box than people think.
Sweet. Yeah, I need to be. We got a few weeks left of some best ball drafts we can get in. I need to get some more Xavier McKinney in my life.
Yeah, and I do like Nate Hobbs. I think I've talked about how much I like this Raiders defense on basically every one of these shows, and I think because of the improvement in the pass rush that we're going to see with Christian Wilkins being there, with Max Crosby, maybe we get something out of Tyree Wilson. I just think that's going to produce more. The pass rush is going to produce more opportunities to make plays on balls in the secondary, and I think Nate Hobbs could be one of the main beneficiaries of that. Guy's been a really kind of steady player, and again, another guy that primarily a nickel, but they kind of move him all over. So we'll see what Antonio Pierce has in store, but I just think that's going to be such a good defense that I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities to make plays.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that with a bolstered defensive line, I think the offensive lines are going to have no choice but to keep eyes all over this defensive line, and Nate Hobbs and defensive backs alike that can rush the passer, maybe get a more clearer path, while offensive lines are distracted by now Christian Wilkins coming off the interior, Tyree Wilson next to him, and Malcolm Kuntz, developing on the opposite side of Max Crosby. So, all the attention is going to be on that D line. So I don't see why Nate Hobbs couldn't get in and up those sack numbers. He's one that it'll get you about 1 a year or so. I see Antonio Pierce kind of like switching it up this season. Maybe he gets a little bit more aggressive now with the extra backup he's got and kind of starts blitzing these defensive backs. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, now Hobbs is a good run defender too, so it may get some tackles in the run game as well. All right, Axe, it's time for the fun. Where are you going to look for your sleepers? Who are your sleepers for this year in the defensive back group that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, somebody I pick up in about every draft because he keeps falling and he finished fairly high. I like to say a guy that I often draft outside of the top 30, but somebody who produced inside of the top 15 or 20 last year, Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback from the Chicago Bears. He was a rookie last year. Oftentimes rookie cornerbacks get targeted heavily. We haven't really talked too much about cornerbacks, but I'll kind of go into it a little bit more here. Let's see. With cornerbacks, it can be a little bit different just because they play a different kind of defense than your safeties might. Most often, they're kind of going to be locked onto somebody. So sometimes, if you're playing a right matchup, cornerbacks can be very valuable. If you listen or much at all in terms of analysts in the IDP space, you probably have heard of Johnny the Greek. He has a cornerback corner that comes out every week of the season. He's super accurate with predicting good matchups on cornerbacks. I think he hits at like a 70% rate. And he's kind of shared his secrets with us. And he said he mainly just targets high passing volume offenses, and their opponents, the cornerbacks on the teams that they're playing on any given week. So like your guys that maybe are completing 25 or more passes a game is probably a good floor. I think there's probably a good I don't know, at least 5, 10 guys that probably can do that pretty regularly. So if you can kind of target one of those games on any given week, and the opposing cornerbacks, now it can be tricky when if you have a shutdown corner like Sauce Gardner, you're probably not going to get much production. So you're going to look more towards the opposite side. You're going to look at a DJ Reed, somebody who is going to be targeted more and give more opportunity because Sauce. I mean, if you're shutting down your wide receiver, there's nobody's going to throw the ball to you because likely going to intercept it. So if you just kind of look at it, Sauce Gardner compared to DJ Reed, you'll notice a significant difference in just how often they were targeted. So that's just kind of a few things you want to pay attention to when you're looking to string a corner, and that's kind of a big thing in IDP. A lot of times we'll say fade DB, and I think that's just more alluding to kind of what I said earlier, in that your top scorers are like in kind of a wider net. Your top 30 kind of scores more like your top 10 or 15. And so like whereas in like other positions that drop off's more significant. So if you can target a good cornerback that's consistent, your Kenny Moores and guys that do it year after year, those are pretty good guys to have. They're pretty solid and reliable. But talking about Tyreek Stevenson, I just liked kind of what we saw from him last year, 84 tackles and 4 interceptions out of a rookie. He was, I think, I have him actually pulled up here on PFF. He was the second most targeted rookie of everyone who qualified. And those were cornerbacks with at least 20% of the league's highest volume. And I got that straight from PFF. So he was the second highest targeted in the league. A guy who's getting the ball thrown at him a ton in a solid defense. I don't think he's the kind of talented corner that we're going to see turn into a shutdown corner next year. So I think that his role ultimately remains the same within this defense. So he's just kind of a guy I really like to kind of stay within that top 30 this year. Roger McCreary is another kind of cornerback that has an opportunity opposite of L'Jarius Sneed, who's developed himself into somewhat of a shutdown corner himself. I don't think he allowed a touchdown all year, or maybe like one. So oftentimes when they play teams, they're probably going to be passing to Roger McCreary a lot, and he's a guy that is just pretty reliable. He's had at least 80 tackles in the last couple of seasons. He will blitz, tons of pass deflections. You can pretty well rely on him as long as he's getting all the snaps. And I think with the new defensive coordinator, I think this team's going to run. I think they're going to, from what I understand, they're going to be more aggressive and just kind of press the box a little bit. So I think he'll be busy this year. Those are just a couple of cornerbacks. I like Trent McDuffie too. He's one that the Chiefs really like to blitz. He had 3 sacks last year, 5 forced fumbles. Great in the big play department, 80 tackles. He's kind of trending up from his rookie year. I think he's utilized the same. Chiefs love to blitz their defensive backs. Even Justin Reed would be kind of someone to keep an eye on, but not expecting too much more other than kind of what we've already seen from those guys in Kansas City. Then I just haven't mentioned PJ Locke. It'd be a shame not to mention PJ Locke's revelation last year towards the end of the season when he got that full-time role in the last 7 games. Was kind of when he really picked it up. He did play in 12 games, but he started in 7 and he got 53 tackles and 3 sacks. So if Denver's going to blitz him and use him now as the ultimate starter since Justin Simmons left, I really like PJ Locke's opportunity, getting 80-90+% of snaps, if not all, and with the kind of floor that he showed us and the big play upside that he can give us, I really like the opportunity for this season.
Yeah, Locke, a guy that Denver's pass defense just did a full 180 when he got inserted into the starting lineup. So he was a big part of that. Talking about the Bears, when you mentioned Tyreek Stevenson, don't be afraid of Jalen Johnson, right? A lot of people think that he's kind of a shutdown corner. That was the kind of dictionary definition of an out of nowhere kind of contract year breakout. So now he's gotten paid. We'll see what happens with him. I'm not afraid of him. I think he's someone who may get targeted. One of the kind of elite cornerbacks that we typically expect don't get targeted. he just might, because that season kind of came out of nowhere. Couple safeties I do like. Julian Blackmon has dealt with some injury issues, but I think he's fully healthy this year. I think free agent that I thought was going to sign somewhere else, but the Indianapolis got him back. So I think this could be the year that he maybe takes that step forward. Another guy I like is Amani Hooker in Tennessee. I just think there's going to be so many opportunities. I think that's just a really bad defense, even though they signed L'Jarius Sneed, like you said. They brought in Kenneth Murray. He's never been good. They lose Vrabel. It's going to be a whole new system. They drafted Cedric Gray, but we haven't really heard much from him. So Hooker's just kind of that reliable guy in the backfield that I think is going to have to make a lot of plays in front of him, just because there's not much in front of him to help out. So I think he's just going to make a lot of tackles just in that kind of vacuum cleaner role, just cleaning up the mess of everybody else.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Now, the defensive line, honestly, the Titans usually put up a good fight. They usually put out, I would say, an underrated.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage Jeffrey Simmons. Obviously, great.
No, right. No. Like the linebacking core definitely is in trouble. It's like that's what I'm saying. Like I agree with you. The guys that are immediately picking up like rushing plays and short yardage pass plays, linebackers, they don't have much of anything. Kenneth Murray was a former first-round draft pick, but hasn't really panned out much of anything in terms of fantasy or production. I mean, PFF grading, nothing. He's not really been great at all. He's just kind of a body out there and gets opportunities. So for fantasy, he's just fine. But in terms of just like the actual NFL, you're not really seeing a whole lot of special things coming from this linebacking core this year. I think you're just going to see a lot of mediocrity. So I like that. I think defensive backs are going to have plenty of extra opportunities for runs that kind of slip through, short yardage pass plays. I mentioned. That's why I really like Roger McCreary. But Hooker was a good guy that, like, when he got in there last year, he really took advantage of opportunity, and he was a guy that could get you a safe amount of tackles on a pretty regular basis. So that's a good call. I like that one.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. That wraps up our look at the IDP tiers for the individual positions. Again, go back and check out the defensive line and linebackers on the IDP Plus network and channel. Axe, before we go, tell everybody what you got going on.
Not a whole lot, I guess. Johnny and I do have a betting show coming up on IDPguys.com. We have a new tool coming out, so stay tuned for that. We have a new betting tool coming out that's going to include tackle props, and Johnny and I are going to head up a show on that, and we're just going to feature that. I'm not even exactly what that's going to entail. We haven't seen it yet, but we're really excited to get it going. Nonetheless, the tackle props are always fun any way you can do it, so we're really excited to get this going. That'll be coming every week, and that's kind of the only like consistent, regularly scheduled stuff that I kind of have going on. Otherwise, I just like to hop on podcasts here and there. You'll see me pop up on occasion on stuff like this, and around the community as I get asked. Excuse me. Other than that, I'm just kind of behind the scenes as I get time. I'll cut some shorts and kind of help publish some stuff for the IDP guys or IDP Plus now. So that's kind of where I'll be. You can find me on Twitter at AxemanIDP. DMs are always open, but I'm just kind of chilling. Yeah, we I didn't mention the Fantasy Expo that happened last weekend. There were some discussions of potential podcasts happening. And remember, we're splitting out IDP Plus through the IDP bets. We got a lot going on. We got best ball. We've got DFS. We've got betting. We've got lines. We've got props. We've got everything coming. So stay tuned. Subscribe to IDP Plus. Subscribe to IDP Bets. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming out. A lot of really cool stuff in the pipeline. So for Axon at Axman IDP on Twitter, I'm Joel, the Joel Worth on Twitter. We will see you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.